What's up, Warriors? Guy Beveridge with Protectors Toolkit, church safety and security made simple. What a special event we're having here tonight. I've got my good friend, my mentor, my brother in Christ, Jason Hensley, here with us tonight on Protectors Toolkit on this special edition of Warrior Wednesday. Jason is going to be talking about using the resources you have at your church. Look, you don't need to be a big mega church to get church safety and security done right and done simply. You just have to have the right resources, and Jason's going to cover some of those for you. Now, Jason is going to tell you a little bit about himself, but I would just tell you he is at Shadow Mountain Church out in Southern California, and he's broadcasting tonight from an undisclosed location in Southern California. So without further ado, I will turn it over to Jason Hensley, and I will monitor some of your questions, so send them in, send all your comments, and we'll get to those at the end. Jason.
Excellent. Thanks, Guy. So obviously I've gotten to do a few videos for Protectors Toolkit, and welcome to Warrior Wednesday. And just like the rest of you, I do my best to jump on. For me here, 5 o'clock, for some of you, 7 o'clock, and East Coast guys, 8 o'clock. But over the last few months, I've been able to jump in and listen to Guy. And so I want to just kind of give you guys a little bit of my bio and tell you who I am, and then I'm going to jump into exactly what Guy was talking about. So I've been a preacher's kid all my life. My dad's 42 years in the ministry, and obviously being a preacher's kid brings a different set of circumstances to you. And so I grew up in the church. And at the age of 24, I took my first church. I actually married my wife, and we moved into the church parsonage a week later. And so we had baptism with fire, and I senior pastored a couple of small churches up until the age of 30. And then I went into law enforcement, and I spent about 15 years in law enforcement, where I got to serve. I worked school resource officer, gangs, public relations, RPIO. I worked SWAT, an active shooter. And then about 3.5 years ago, I left law enforcement and became a director of safety at a set of charter schools in Northern California. And then about 3 years ago, my wife and I moved to San Diego. My wife, Heidi, is our children's pastor at Shadow Mountain, and I'm director of safety and pastoral protection. So that's a little bit of me in a nutshell. And I get the honor of keeping an eye on Pastor Dr. David Jeremiah. And obviously right now things are a little bit different. But the thing that I want to talk to you guys tonight about is using the resources that you have in-house. This one tonight isn't going to be super long, but I do want to drive some points home. There are a lot of you out there that are listening that are team leads, or you're overseeing the safety program at your church. And so I want to give you guys some things to think about. And I really think that right now, especially with everything that's going on, with a lot of us being quarantined, and some of you guys are starting to ramp back up. Some of you guys are already going again. Here in California, we're in a different set of circumstances, as you guys know, and we're not going to get political tonight. But I want to give you guys a few things to think about when it comes to your team and the importance of connecting with the people on your team. Now, if you want to have a safety team where you guys are just doing church safety, you can do that. But I want you guys to start thinking a little bit more and broaden your perspective. And look at the guys and the gals that are within your ministry as people that you have the ability to minister to. God has put them in your ministry for a reason. And so tonight, I want to give you 6 things, and then we'll do a little Q&A. The first thing that I want to talk about tonight is the importance of praying for your team. 2.5 years ago, when I took on this position, the role that I'm in right now, I immediately got my roster, and I began praying for the guys and gals that serve in my ministry. I really didn't know them that well. And as a matter of fact, I was still spending a lot of time connecting with my brothers from Northern California because I was missing community. I was missing fellowship. But I found within a short period of time that as I prayed for the people on my team, I began getting more involved in their lives. And then I began messaging them and texting them and giving them phone calls and asking them about certain things within their life, and began praying for them specifically. And since then, our team has grown. We've tripled in size in the last 2.5 years. And God has blessed us and brought amazing people in because of that ability for me to be able to start connecting with those guys. And then they started shoulder tapping and saying, hey, you need to join our church safety team. And so I know a lot of you guys that are out there are listening are smaller to medium-sized churches, and your recruiting pool might be a little bit smaller, but I want you to take the time that if it's only 2 or 3 or 4 guys on your team, man, start praying for them, start diving in and really petitioning God, calling their name out to God in your personal devotion time. So the first thing I want you to do is to put it on your list is start praying for your guys and be intentional about it. The second thing kind of leads into the concept of praying about it, but it's supporting your team. And that is, not only are you going to be praying for them, but you're also going to be a resource for them. You have the ability to be a support, an encourager, someone who is going to come alongside them and be a cheerleader. For me, I've got a lot of first responders, obviously, on my team. And being in San Diego, we have a lot of folks from the military tactical community. Those guys, from time to time, are going to be involved in internal investigations and different things like that, or just having life issues going on in their life, and to be a part of their life, to kind of come along and support them and help shepherd. And so I want to encourage you, number 1, to pray. Number 2, to support your team. Number 3, that I want to drive home with you guys is use your team. Now, this is an area that I think is an issue for some leaders that, for the lack of a better term, are insecure with who they are. You need to be able to move away from all of the drama of being insecure and saying, I know so many leaders today that say it's my way or the highway, and they don't take the time to listen to the fellows or the gals on their team. I've been blessed. And if you really start to look at your team and say, okay, this guy's good at this and this guy's good at this, within the article that I wrote leading into this, which is also on Protectors Toolkit Facebook page, I talk about how that I have a retired U.S. Customs guy on my team, Hunter Davis, as well as a Navy SEAL captain, Rob Monroe, on my team. And it would be absolutely absurd for me to not take the time to pick their brains and allow them to speak into it, speak into ministry. So use your team. And by the way, on my team, everybody has a voice. If there's a situation that or an altercation or a situation that we addressed during a weekend service, we'll take that thing, we'll debrief it, and everybody has the ability to speak into it. So use your team. Number 4, educate your team. The other cool part of this too is if you're using your team, you can use those guys on your team that have certain skill sets to also be a part of the education process. Now, for us here in California, the idea of training guys that are current sheepdogs or current first responders is kind of a taboo issue. So we have coffee time at the church. And during that time, our guys that are available will come and we'll do a walkthrough. We'll run through scenarios. And so whatever works for your church. And that's one of the great things about Protectors Toolkit when it comes to educating your team. Guy has done an amazing job of providing resources for you guys when it comes to training your team. But I want to encourage you and drive it home again. We often say here at Protectors Toolkit, every training is not about how you're going to draw your firearm and engage a bad guy. There are so many other things that we have to cover. And so I want to encourage you to jump in, to go to our website and see what other options are available for training for you and your team. Number 5 that I want to give you, the 5 countdown, is use your facilities for first responders. Over the last 2.5 years, we've had 3 of our local SWAT teams in. And man, what a golden opportunity for you and your team. I usually will grab 3 or 4 of my guys on my team and we'll kind of walk through when the SWAT team is doing their little debriefs and even their training. And for us here in San Diego, we've actually opened up our church and made it available for the military tactical teams as well. And they've used our church. And that is just an invaluable tool for you personally to just be able to be the fly on the wall and listen to what the team leads and what the SWAT operators have to say while going through your church. That's kind of a resource. The last point that I want to bring to you is give your team ministry ownership. And I think this is really important. Give everybody on your team the ability to be a part of it, to speak into it, into the process. It doesn't mean that you're going to use absolutely every idea that's thrown at you, but it gives you the ability to step back and listen. And for me, often, if one of my guys will contact me, whether it's a text message or an email, and said, hey, this happened this weekend and we should do X, Y, and Z, I'll immediately contact them and say, hey, let's do breakfast or lunch. Let's sit down, let's unpack that. And then if we need to continue to unpack that, then I bring a group of my other guys in and we start to really dive into it. So guys, use your team. Last thing that I want to point out, though, is what good is having a robust safety team if we're not fulfilling the purpose of the church. If we're a team that's just running rogue and we're not listening and being obedient to the purpose of the church, and that is to fulfill the Great Commission to go into all the world to preach the gospel, baptizing and teaching, then we're wasting our time. We may as well just pack it in. Guys, I want you to realize and understand that sometimes we are the folks that are going to make that first impression with somebody who's attending our church. And let's not ever lose sight of that. I believe it's so important that we as a team put everything else aside. And yeah, we have a responsibility to keep the flock safe, to protect the congregation. But let's also remember the purpose of what the church is there for. So hopefully this was a little bit of a help to some of you. I encourage you that even if it's just one of the things that I threw out today, that you're able to take that and apply it. I want to encourage you, especially right now, for those of us that are kind of in this lull, to take the opportunity to be able to ramp up and to fire off. And by the way, it doesn't take a lot of work for us to start praying for the guys and gals. I say guys, welcome back to the conversation there, Guy, but guys and gals, some churches have plenty of women on their team too. So we have a few on our team. So we want to shoot off and see what we have any questions firing in, or if you have any comments or thoughts.
Yeah, we're getting some, Jason. One of the ones that came in, how is your, being what we consider a mega church, it definitely is a mega church out there, but how have you seen your team grow over the years?
Yeah, so, when I came on, we had a paradigm shift. My predecessor, who is an amazing sheepdog, great, strong believer, his focus was primarily, pastor's protection. And so for us, when I came in, we did a paradigm shift where it's really, we have pastor's protection, we have a team there, and then we also have our larger team that oversees our safety. And that was just an area that really quickly just kind of took off. And I believe it started by taking the time to go and have coffee or lunch or breakfast with these guys. And obviously, a lot of the guys that are listening tonight are working 40-hour jobs and doing church safety on the side. And I understand that. I'm fortunate. You're fortunate. We're blessed. But I take the time to get that person, take them to lunch and share your vision, pour into their lives, because, 1 hour lunch, you could have a lot of buy-in after that and show them the importance and the need of having them on their team. And I bet you if I go and have coffee or breakfast or lunch with one of the guys, we're probably at about 90% that they're going to be jumping in and involved in the ministry. And it also gives me the ability to vet as well.
Sure. Yeah.
So
one of the other questions we got, describe a little bit more or go into what you think is training your team important?
You broke up real quick. Can you repeat that?
Yeah, the question was, do you feel that training your team and training as a team is important?
Yeah, and for us here, obviously I am fortunate. A majority of my guys are current or retired first responders, or current or retired military tactical guys. And so I also depend on learning from them. I've been out of the game for 3.5 years, and best practice is always changing, right? And if we're not chasing best practice, we're going to be left behind the 8 ball. And I think it's important to be able to maintain the same stuff that my first responders when I have a first responder coming to the church, a black and white is on his way to the church for whatever the situation is. I want to know how they're going to react and how they're going to respond to a situation. And so it's important to have those guys being able to speak into your training. And so for me, that's one of those areas where, yeah, I was a SWAT guy. I was an active shooter instructor, and I could go through my list of things, but what good is that if it's what we used to do? And so I think it's important to have every guy or gal that's a team lead that's listening tonight have somebody that they can glean from in order to then turn around and to be able to train your team. And so I guess that's probably the long answer, but I think it's really important that when you train, that you're training properly and that you're training with the right information. And just like if, when somebody comes in, and you've stated this often, that you'll glean information from the local law enforcement before you go in and start saying X, Y, Z when you're speaking at a conference in a certain part of the country, because every part of the country handles things a little bit different. But when it comes back to the training question, for us, like I said while I was talking, in California law enforcement, they don't like it where you're training on a different team. And so that's why whatever, local law enforcement is doing, I'm going to take that information and turn around and train my guys that are either retired, because I do have retirees that have been out of the game for 15 years. And at one time they were tactical and great sheepdogs and still are sheepdogs, but we got to kind of keep them up to par.
Good. What is one thing that surprised you about church safety and security? I guess the difference between law enforcement and the church side. What is one thing, if you had to grab onto it and say, this has really surprised me about the church side of safety and security?
Oh, that's a good question. Obviously, I was in the ministry prior. So, I was a pastor, and then I went into law enforcement. So I feel like I kind of have the understanding of the tug of both directions. I think it is a little bit different when you're in a larger church. And really, I guess, whether it's a larger church or a small church, there's always going to be different people that you have to process with and implement things. For me, when I was in law enforcement, there's the issue, attack the issue, and move on. Every once in a while, an administrator, and I'll leave you out of the picture, an administrator would want to speak into something and kind of throw a stick in the spokes. But within the church, and when you're implementing policies and procedures and that kind of stuff, you've got to take it a little bit slower. Everybody's going to kind of have a little piece of putting their opinion in there. And so, it's taking that, picking it out and saying, okay, I've listened to all the voices and now here's where we're going.
Really good. Really good. So let me try to parse this out here. Can you give us an example or a success you guys had where you knew because of the training you had, because of the team cohesiveness, that you had a successful outcome? One example maybe is something that happened within the church where you knew that because of the training, because of the camaraderie you had built and the leadership you had, it only ended successfully because of that.
Yeah. I don't know. It's probably been about 5 or 6 months ago, and I'm going to keep it very general, obviously, but we had a situation where we had an individual that we were concerned with that came in and was showing unusual behaviors. So we had a couple of our guys on that person, trailing them loosely. At the same time, while we're doing that, church is getting out. We're in between services. So we have our 9 o'clock and then we have our 10:45 service. In between, we're getting reports of a 5150, a guy screaming at the other end of the property. And so now we have 2 major incidents taking place. And, we have what we call a team lead role, incident lead role. I'm not necessarily always the incident lead, because if I'm doing the protection piece, that's my priority. And so I have one incident lead. Well, the amazing part is I had one incident lead that was taking care of one issue, another incident lead immediately that wasn't serving incident lead at the time, but we have 2 different issues taking place now, immediately jumps in and takes 2 more guys. Hey, I've got the second issue and I'm grabbing so-and-so and so-and-so, and they take off. I didn't ever get on the air one time. The amazing part of that is, and that's where you just got to trust the guys on your team. And so I have one guy, or I have 3 guys addressing one issue and another 3 guys addressing another issue. Well, I'm handling my assignment, and I didn't have to worry about it. We debriefed after it. A couple of things that we did learn out of that, just kind of a side note, is the ability to run to a secondary channel so that you're handling one issue on one channel and handling another issue, kind of like how we do in law enforcement. And so that was one of the cool takeaways that we learned from that situation. So that was a big win for us. And after we do things like that, we will always debrief. So I'll bring all those guys back in and say, okay, what went well, what didn't go well, what can we fix? And then we can rally that up. And and the other thing too is, like, if something happens on Saturday night, we want to communicate that to Sunday morning teams as well, because just depending on the circumstances, that could roll over into the morning service. So it's important to communicate from service to service for those churches that run multiple services.
Yeah, that's fantastic. You illustrated that. It's so vitally important we have those after action reviews, no matter how minor the issue, because there is always room for improvement in every process. And that for you to say that and then say, you know, we've got to brief the next crew or the next set of guys coming on as well, because it could be a potential situation that pours out into that service, or maybe even later on during the week on the campus. So really good communication on your part, and excellent leadership. I've been in that position where, you know, you want to be the guy in charge, but you have another post or duty assignment you have to be at. And so you have to have full faith and confidence in your teams that they're going to handle it in a way that you have trained them to do. So
we learned that lesson about 1.5 years ago while I'm sitting on, where I sit normally when I'm in protection mode during service. And I was in the service, and we had a major incident take place, and I was trying to coordinate resources while sitting on the front row doing protection. And that was a debacle. And we learned that lesson real quick, and immediately changed it the very following week. And that's when we started the incident lead position. And it's proven to be a fantastic piece for us.
Yeah, it's sometimes hard to take that Superman S off your chest and let somebody else hold on to it for a little while.
But that's also the importance of getting to know your team, trusting your team, just like I just got done talking about. And if you don't have those guys that are qualified to do it, you need to start pouring into them and providing training and being that kind of leader. And, you know, the one thing too that I didn't point out that I think is important to point out is, you know, we're dealing with volunteers. It's ministry. And a majority of sheepdogs are A+ personalities. And so, you know, I'm not talking about as a leader of ministry, and especially safety ministry. I'm not saying walk around like a big sissy la and bowing down and that kind of stuff. You do need to be strong, but I also believe that we need to have a mindset that these are folks that are wanting to use their skill set for ministry. And, you know, and that's another important piece of this when it comes to the leadership within what we do. And so those guys that are running, that have smaller churches, medium-sized churches, or even churches larger than what you and I attend, those are principles that have got to be implemented immediately.
Yeah, always be training your replacement, right?
Yep.
That's it. Any last words of wisdom or parting thoughts, Jason, before we wrap it up?
Well, you know, we were talking about the training, and I alluded to it. And obviously, Protectors Toolkit, we've got a ton of resources. And so for those guys that don't have those resources in place, and I mean, I'm here, I've got an enormous amount of resources available to me. I still depend on you and the resources that we have through Protectors Toolkit, even if it's just small pieces of it that are just going to enhance, to me, the amount of money that you're going to pay out for the resource through Protectors Toolkit and the resources is invaluable. And so whether you're a mega church director, medium, small, there's a benefit to everybody. So I want to encourage. And the other cool part is take advantage of the virtual threat assessment.
Yep. Very good. Well, thank you. So as Protectors, as we wrap it up tonight, make sure you hit that like button. If you haven't liked Protectors Toolkit Facebook page yet, hit that like button. You'll be getting all the updates from us when we have live videos like this. I'm going to announce it now here. We've got it set in motion. I'm going to put out a date very soon, but we're going to do an interview with Stephen Williford. Stephen Williford is the good guy with a gun at Sutherland Springs. and we're going to do an interview with him on a Warrior Wednesday live version and towards the end of the month. So keep watch for that. Hit the like button and then share. Sharing is caring. If you got value or were blessed by this, make sure you share far and wide. Sharing is caring, and that's what we should do as Christians. Share this with somebody you know that would be blessed by this ministry message tonight. And always, if you do, like Jason said, want to join the membership, there's no obligation. Get in, try it. If it doesn't fit for you, then there's no obligation to get out of it. Just let us know it wasn't a fit for you, and we'll take care of that for you. And last but not least, protectors, as I always say, keep them safe.